Welcome back to HiddenShift. The events of January 3, 2025 mark a massive turning point in history, yet few understand why this truly happened. The extraction of Nicolas Maduro from Caracas was presented as a triumph of law enforcement. However, if you look at the map, you realize this was not about justice or drugs. It was a strategic seizure of assets in a global war fought in the shadows between great powers. We need to look deeper at the real motives. The White House story is one of liberation and justice, a narrative designed to appease the press. They claim removing Maduro was necessary to restore democracy and halt narcotics flowing into the U.S. While these issues are real, they are merely a convenient pretext for a larger maneuver. The true objective was never about human rights. It was about securing the hemisphere against foreign influence that had grown far too dangerous for Washington to ignore. To understand the timing, look away from Venezuela toward the shifting power balance with China and Russia. For the last decade, the U.S. watched as rivals established a foothold in its backyard. Venezuela ceased to be just a rogue state. It became a forward operating base for the East. Washington realized that if they waited any longer, the window to act would close forever, leaving a permanent and hostile fortress right in the middle of the Caribbean. The most obvious factor is energy, but not for the reasons most analysts cite. Venezuela possesses the largest oil reserves in the world, essential for industrial use. In a world where energy security is synonymous with national survival, the U.S. could not afford to let these vast resources fall under the control of the BRICS alliance. This was a move to deny an asset as much as it was to seize one. It effectively secures the future supply chain for the West. China has played a massive game of chess here, using the Belt and Road Initiative to entrap nations while securing rights to resources. By 2024, Beijing had effectively purchased a controlling stake in Venezuela's future production in exchange for keeping the regime afloat. The U.S. saw this economic colonization as a direct threat to its energy independence. The capture of Maduro nullifies these deals, forcing Beijing to renegotiate with a new U.S. ally. Beyond economics, a terrifying military reality was developing on the coast. Intelligence reports pointed to China establishing a dual-use naval facility near the Caribbean. Such a base would have given the Chinese Navy a logistical hub just a few hours from Florida. This operation was a preemptive strike to ensure the Atlantic does not become a contested zone in a future conflict. The Pentagon could not tolerate a rival fleet so close to home. Russia's involvement was equally provocative, though their contribution was more about hardware and disruption. Moscow had been deploying nuclear-capable bombers and advanced air defense systems to Venezuela on a rotational basis. These assets were not there to protect the people. They were placed to threaten the U.S. mainland. By removing the leadership that invited them, Washington has evicted the Russian military from its only secure foothold here. We must consider the Monroe Doctrine, a policy warning outside powers against intervening in the Western Hemisphere. For years this doctrine seemed dead, but the John 3rd operation was its violent resurrection. The message sent to Moscow and Beijing was crystal clear. South America is off-limits. The U.S. demonstrated it is willing to violate international norms to prevent the encirclement strategy that its rivals were aggressively pursuing. The financial dimension is often overlooked, yet it is a critical driver. Venezuela was a vocal proponent of trading oil in currencies other than the dollar, specifically the yuan. This push for de-dollarization threatens the core of American economic hegemony, the petrodollar. If Venezuela had succeeded in leading OPEC nations away from the dollar, the U.S. economy would face a crisis. This raid silenced that dangerous movement instantly. There is also the matter of the Panama Canal, a vital choke point for trade sitting uncomfortably close to Venezuelan influence. China has already established a presence at both ends of the canal. A hostile Venezuela, armed with Russian missiles, could theoretically threaten shipping through this artery in a time of war. Securing Caracas ensures that the southern approach to the canal remains in friendly hands, safeguarding the flow of goods. The role of Celia Flores in this capture is significant and reveals the depth of U.S. intelligence penetration. She was not just a spouse, she was a key operator who managed the complex web of alliances keeping Maduro in power. By taking her too, the U.S. decapitated the regime's ability to appoint a successor from within the family circle. This was a calculated move to ensure total institutional collapse rather than just a simple change of head. We must acknowledge the technological aspect, which showcased a new level of cyber warfare. Before a helicopter crossed the coastline, the Venezuelan air defense grid was reportedly blinded by a massive cyber attack. This silenced the Russian-made S-300 batteries that were supposed to make Caracas impenetrable. This was a warning to other nations that buying advanced hardware is useless if the adversary can switch off your eyes with code. The reaction from Latin America has been a mix of public condemnation and private relief. While leaders in Brazil and Colombia criticized the violation of sovereignty, behind closed doors, many were tired of the instability Maduro caused. The refugee crisis alone had strained their economies to the breaking point. The U.S. likely received tacit approval, or at least a promise of non-interference from neighbors desperate for the region to stabilize. This serves as a stark warning to other rogue nations, particularly Iran, which deepened ties with Venezuela. Tehran used the country as a hub for intelligence and to bypass sanctions. The swiftness of the U.S. strike demonstrates that distance is no longer a guarantee of safety. It signals that the United States is shifting from a passive policy of sanctions to an active policy of kinetic decapitation when its core interests are threatened. U.S. internal politics played a role, serving as a distraction from domestic economic troubles. Historically, wartime presidents, or those who take decisive action against foreign adversaries, see a temporary boost. This operation was timed to project strength and unity at a moment when the political fabric at home was fraying. It is a classic rally-round-the-flag effect, the aftermath creates domestic a dangerous critics power and focus the nation's that anger could spiral externally. into civil conflict. The U.S. now faces the Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you own it, meaning they are responsible for rebuilding. There is a high risk that remnants of the security forces could form insurgencies, leading to a scenario similar to Iraq post-2003. This would justify a long-term U.S. military presence, effectively turning Venezuela into a protectorate. The installation of a transitional government is underway, but this new leadership will essentially be a proxy for Washington. The primary mandate will be to privatize the oil industry and invite Western corporations back in. We are likely to see contracts awarded to American and European energy giants within the year. This transfer of wealth is the return on investment for the expensive military operation that just took place this week. We should consider the environmental narrative spun to justify modernizing Venezuela's oil infrastructure. The U.S. will claim the Maduro regime's mismanagement caused devastation, and that American technology is needed to fix it. This greenwashing of the occupation will help sell the continued extraction of fossil fuels to a skeptical global public. It frames the takeover as an act of environmental stewardship rather than simple resource theft. The psychological impact on the global South cannot be overstated, as it shatters the illusion of multipolarity. For years, nations believed aligning with China or Russia provided a security umbrella against intervention. The events of January 3rd proved that when chips are down, neither Beijing nor Moscow can protect their allies from the U.S. military. This realization will force many developing nations to realign their policies out of fear. There is a dark irony that the U.S. used the war on drugs as the legal justification for a geopolitical seizure. The indictment against Maduro for narco-terrorism provided the legal cover, yet it is a tool selectively applied. There are many other leaders worldwide with similar accusations who are ignored because they are strategic allies. This highlights the weaponization of international law, where justice is pursued only when it fits the plan. Looking forward, we must watch how the BRICS nations retaliate, not militarily, but through asymmetric economic warfare. They may accelerate the development of their alternative payment systems, or dump U.S. Treasury bonds in protest. The capture of Maduro might win the battle for Venezuela, but it could accelerate the war for the global financial system. The trust required for global trade is damaged, and rival powers will race to insulate themselves. The intelligence community's role in the months leading up to the operation reveals a sophisticated campaign of psychological warfare. Rumors of betrayal, offers of amnesty, and internal sabotage were likely used to isolate Maduro before the raid. This suggests the U.S. has refined its ability to induce regime collapse from the inside out. The physical capture was merely the final act of a long drama played out in the minds of the leadership. As dust settles, the narrative shifts toward the rebuilding phase, which will be incredibly lucrative for American contractors. Just as in previous conflicts, the reconstruction of Venezuela's infrastructure will be funded by its own oil wealth, but paid to U.S. firms. It is a closed loop of capital extraction that benefits the military-industrial complex while ostensibly aiding the victim. The cycle of intervention and profit continues. Ultimately, the January 3rd operation was a desperate attempt to reset the clock on the decline of American influence in the Western Hemisphere. It was a violent reminder that the U.S. still considers Latin America its sphere of influence and will tolerate no competitors. Whether this bold move secures another century of dominance or merely delays the inevitable rise of a multipolar world remains to be seen. But the rules of the game have changed. We are living through a historical shift, where visible events are merely distractions from covert economic wars being fought for our future. The capture of Maduro is just one move in a game that will decide who controls the next century. To stay ahead of the narrative and uncover the truths that the mainstream media often ignores, make sure you subscribe to HiddenShift and hit the notification bell. We will continue to dig deeper into the stories,